This week on SibRiv.
Hi,
Hawaii.
Where's your father? You can't drive.
He's literally at home. You can even
You can give it a little bit of gas.
So I went in, I took my driver's test, not for the learner's permit, for the actual license, passed everything, and then they made me wait another 2 hours because they had to confirm that I was not the same David Christopher Scott that was serving a life sentence for first-degree homicide in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 3 of SibRiv, the Sibling Rivalry Podcast. I am Dana, and I'm joined here by my effervescent brother and sister.
I'm Dave, the oldest.
Michelle, the youngest.
How are you two doing this week?
I'm doing pretty good. My lovely wife wanted to say hello to both of you from Vietnam, so I'm passing that on.
Oh, should we do it, shall we?
Hi, Hawaii.
Hi, Hawaii.
Shout out.
I'm sure she'll appreciate that.
How about you, Shell?
Good. Busy week, but yeah, good. Same old, same old. Cannoli is our life, so.
Yeah. We've had a jam-packed week over here at the Scott household. So I figured I'd tie in my weekly check-in with Dana's clip of the week.
It's time for Dana's clip of the week.
Come on, Mason. I'll hand you the phone when I'm done. Good. Okay. Okay. I have the window down. Let me know when you see Mama so I can hand Mason the phone.
Daddy, shut the door. Shut the door. It's still open. Hi, how was work? I am seriously your driver. Daddy was asleep. He's not even behind. Lynn, you want to change the channel?
Yeah. I'm playing a game.
Okay. We're going to
Happy birthday, Papa.
Can you shut the door?
Where's your father? You can't drive.
He's literally at home. You can even
He's right there.
And then once you get to the straightaway, you can give it a little bit of gas. Yep. So Hunter, my firstborn, got his permit this week. He's driving behind the wheel. Unbelievable. He's very excited.
Can't believe it.
Yeah, had quite an ordeal to get his permit at the RMV.
Really?
The paperwork we brought wasn't going to be good enough for the real ID. We were at we waited for like 45 minutes to be called, and then there's me and maybe Hunter. We waited for 45 minutes to be called, and then when we finally got to the window, we were at the window for like another hour because nothing. I felt so bad. I mean, the guy working the window actually felt bad for us too because nothing he was trying was working. It wasn't accepting the paperwork that we brought in. So, because I brought in like our lease, because Hunter's name is on our lease too as one of our children. But the leasing office sends us a copy of the lease without it signed, so they weren't accepting that. Yeah, health insurance things they weren't accepting for some reason, even though it's on the list of documents they accept. So I had to sign like an affidavit and then give him the birth certificate, and he could only get like a regular credential. He couldn't get a real ID. But eventually at least he was able to take the test and get his permit so he can at least drive. But
Wow.
so the poor kid, after an hour of waiting at the window, you could see his anxiety going up. I thought he was going to cry. And the worker at the window felt so bad too. And which wasn't his fault. He was doing everything he could to try to help us out. But So he went in. They took him into the room to take his test. I went out to the lobby to wait, and like 7 minutes later, I hear, "Hey, did you pass?" from the security guard, and I walk out, and it's Hunter, and I'm like, "Oh my god, I hope that was fast." I'm like, "Hunter, did you pass?" He goes, "Yeah." I'm like, "Oh yes." And then the guy at the window was like, "Did you pass?" And he goes, "Yeah." And he goes, "Yeah."
Oh, that's so cute.
That's nice.
So yeah, so that was Wednesday, and then I've brought him out every day driving since. So the first day we went out in the parking lot. The next day we were in the parking lot for about 3 minutes, and I said, "You want to try driving on the street?" And he said, "Oh, I don't know." And we were at a school, and I said, "Well, there's a neighborhood right next to the school, so we'll just pull out the main road, and then you'll turn right in the neighborhood. We'll just drive around the neighborhood for a while." So then we did that. Then we drove around the neighborhood for like probably like 20, 25 minutes. And then the next day we went out, and he drove around our neighborhood. And then yesterday we went out, and he drove all over our town. He was
Wow.
doing,
Nice.
yep. So first week he's gotten some good road experience. It's very exciting.
Yeah. Well, congratulations,
That's
Hunter.
I know, that's awesome. I remember being petrified to drive.
Did I ever tell you guys what happened when I got my license and why they waited so long to give it to me at the DMV?
No.
So I went in, I took my driver's test, not for the learner's permit, for the actual license, passed everything, and then they made me wait another 2 hours because they had to confirm that I was not the same David Christopher Scott that was serving a life sentence for first-degree homicide in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma.
Wow.
They had to make sure I wasn't the same guy.
That's insane. Yeah, you do have a very common name, I guess.
It is a very common name. Yeah.
And
But
that issue has followed you too, like through all your flights and like.
Yeah. Maybe that's why I always get stopped every time I come back into the country. Who knows? I mean, yeah.
Could be. Maybe the other
Could be.
David Christopher, escaped, and they need to make sure it's not you.
So.
Oh, that's so funny. Yeah, Mike already said he's going to make Hunter a profile on the Tesla so that when he drives it, he'll be good.
We were leaving the registry, and that was the first question he asked me. "You think Uncle Mike will let me drive the Tesla?"
So has Mike had any problems driving his Tesla given the current climate going on today? No one's like keyed his car or anything like that, or interesting.
No, he's had a Tesla now though for I think like 4 or 5 years. Yeah, no, nothing so far. Knock on wood that there hasn't been any issues.
Fingers crossed.
But yeah, seriously.
Okay, so this week's topic is David's topic. So, David, why don't you give us the rundown of what we're talking about this week?
Yeah, today we're going to talk a little bit about sibling birth order and, what are the characteristics of people who tend to be in a certain position among siblings, as, what order they were born in. I'll talk a little bit about, it won't be like a class, so don't worry, but I will talk a little bit about like where the theory came from. And to answer the question on Dana's thumbnail, something of, does sibling birth order determine your destiny? No, it doesn't. So just want to get that out front. It is, I think, one of many, many different factors that go into forming who we are. But I thought it would be a pretty good topic to dive into today and discuss amongst ourselves, what traits we think we, kind of line up with this theory that we have and where we think it goes totally off the rails.
Awesome.
Sounds good.
Before I get into it, do you guys, either one of you, have any sort of ideas? Like when you think of the characteristics, Dana, of like the middle child, what do you think of? And Shell, being the youngest, what do you think of the youngest or the oldest? What personality traits come to mind in general, not just, based on what you know of your siblings?
I feel
whenever
like for
I think
youngest,
Go ahead, Shelly.
I was going to say, I feel like for the youngest children, like, I feel like we're probably a little more carefree because I feel like the older siblings always get kind of more of the rules and such. But yeah.
I feel like with the middle child, they're always constantly trying to get attention and fighting for attention.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much the hallmark of the middle child, like as far as what most people think, like, you know, often neglected, not paid much attention to. I don't know if that is how our brother feels or not. Maybe he could answer. Maybe
at times.
Yeah, so I can get right into it if you want.
Please do.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, wait a
minute. Time out. You didn't tell us any trademarks of what you thought the oldest sibling had.
The oldest sibling. You know, so when I think of sibling birth order, I think of the oldest. Typically, to me, oldest child is synonymous with responsibility. That's what I think of. But, you know, I think it's important to keep in mind, just because you're the oldest child, even if you have several younger siblings that you might have helped in the care of while they were growing up, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to turn out to be a responsible person, right? I mean, it doesn't. Like I said, it really doesn't determine your destiny. We can't fit everybody into a little box and say, like, this is the one factor that determines who you are, right? This is just one of many. But I do think it has an influence. So oldest, I think responsibility. Middle child, I think neglected. Youngest child, I think carefree and attention is what I think in my head. Those are the immediate associations that come up. So,
okay.
May I continue?
Yes, you may.
Okay.
Yes, big brother, you may.
So this theory came about, I mean, not surprisingly, it was a psychologist, Alfred Adler, that first kind of looked at this theory. He was Austrian, and kind of it's been a long time since like my bachelor's degree. So I'm pretty sure he was around the turn of the 20th century when he was practicing. I don't know if I can't remember if he practiced at the same time as like Freud and Carl Jung, but he was definitely like sort of in that that era with them. Alfred Adler, he didn't just look at sibling birth order, and it wasn't like he formulated his entire sort of practice or theory around that, but it was just one factor that he recognized had an influence on how people turn out. He also came up with the idea of the inferiority complex, this idea that people are born, you know, with these feelings of inferiority, and that's what drives us to sort of succeed and compensate, to be what he would call socially useful. You know, having that feeling of mattering, I think, look at that. So that Adler is the one who kind of first looked at this. And then I think I told you all, I'm, you know, as a family therapist, a lot of my own practice, family therapists, every therapist out there has sort of, I think, their favorite practitioners of yore that they kind of base their worldview around, how they approach therapy. I am very much a follower of Murray Bowen in his family systems theory. He was a medical doctor that was practicing and psychiatrist that was practicing in like the 60s and 70s. He died, I think, in 1990. But he was like sort of the founding father of marriage and family, one of them, of marriage and family therapy. In today's world, and even when I was going through grad school 10 years ago, he had fallen out of favor. Oh, Dana's got a picture of him up on the screen. His ideas had fallen out of favor because he's very much rooted in like traditional ideas of like gender roles and family and things like that. And obviously, you know, our society has very different, more progressive ideas of what those things can look like. Having said that, I think a lot of what he had to say and a lot of what he contributed to our understanding of family dynamics and relationships in general still has a lot of value. So that's that's a general, just kind of like, here's where it came from. Bowen, when he looked at sibling position, because he didn't just come up with it on his own. There was another psychologist named Walter Toman, who I'm actually not very familiar of, but that's where Maury Bowen lifted most of his theory of sibling position from this other psychologist, not necessarily Alfred Adler, but Walter Toman. So I've been lecturing already, so I feel like I'm putting everybody through a Psych History 101 class. But that's where, those are the people that really started looking at this, sibling position and how does it influence us and in what ways. So some of the characteristics of, oldest child, middle child, youngest child, and only children are pretty much, I think they're out there in the popular culture, and they pretty much match up with what researchers, when they look at this topic, what they think. So, firstborns, it's interesting. And I think this is definitely true. Firstborns are known as sort of like, they're like the guinea pig for parents because, right? I mean, like most parents for their firstborn, they have a lot of anxiety about raising a child, it's their first time through the process. So, I think that's where sometimes parents can tend to get maybe overprotective. Of course, there are always exceptions, right? But firstborns, sometimes when I look back on our own, growing up, I really do wonder just the way that mom really came down hard on me for stuff. It does seem to me that she let a lot of things slide with both of you that she never would have with me. I don't know if that's true or not. Dana's shaking his head already. What's your view of that, Dana?
I disagree.
I definitely disagree.
How so?
Well, first off, I think, see, this is a lot about the family dynamics, which I'm sure as we get into this podcast, as time goes on, we'll probably talk a lot about our own family dynamics as we were growing up. But there were a lot of times, David, that you weren't around because I think you were kind of like escaping some of the stuff in the house, right? So I don't think you saw a lot of the discipline that Shell and I got because you weren't around for it. But I definitely was not allowed to get away with things. In fact, there was things I got in trouble for that I didn't even do. So, yeah, I have a lot of stuff to talk about from childhood, but yeah. So, and I'm sure Shell has some thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, I disagree. Not necessarily because I'm the youngest, but because I'm the only girl. I think I had some rules that didn't apply to you, both. But so I think, and at that time, again, specifically the house we grew up in, that like religion was a bigger part, I think, when I was growing up than when you guys were growing up. I think that played a big part in what I could do, what I couldn't do. I mean, I stopped for like a innocent thing. I stopped trick-or-treating in like 4th or 5th grade because it was the devil's holiday and we're not celebrating it. When all my other friends through high school were still trick-or-treating. And again, that's like one small thing. So I think it's little things like that, that it was because of religion and because I'm the only girl. I definitely think there were some differences there.
I think the religion thing is interesting because when you mention that, that we grew up with less religion and Dana looked a little unsure. I think Dana might have been the only one that escaped that. Ironically enough, the influence of religion.
I would argue that.
Well, let me explain, because from the time I was 5, I had to go to church. And even after mom stopped going to church, I still had to go to Holy Family every Sunday. Like, she was absolutely adamant that was something I could not get out of. Same thing with Shell. Shell had to go to Calvary until however old you were. Mom made me go until
the day I got married.
Yeah.
Well, I was birthed until 16. I had to go to church. There was a little break between when we went to the Catholic church and mom switched to the Episcopalian church, but as soon as we switched churches, I had to go every Sunday again.
Did she get confirmed?
I had to get confirmed as well.
No, okay.
I have a picture of you at my confirmation. What are you talking about?
Hey, it was a long time ago, man. I can't remember everything.
But
But I think, this goes into what I was saying. The sibling position in the birth order is just one small piece of how parents choose to raise their kids, right? Or maybe not even consciously choose, but how they respond to their kids, and what rules happen with each child. So, but I mean, I do just want to say we did get confirmation from Mom that she punished me the most out of all y'all. So,
And I was second in that. Mom also claimed that I was second in the groundings and all that. Thank God we asked her that.
yeah, that doesn't
Otherwise,
make
we'd
sense
be
to me because
debating
I
this
was
for a
always.
whole hour.
I felt like I
We
was
would-
always
yeah.
getting in trouble. I was
Yeah.
getting in trouble constantly, but I think maybe you were the actual punishments for you, David, were probably definitely the harshest, as
Oh,
far
yeah.
as like lengthy groundings and stuff like that.
2 weeks. 2 weeks was the standard protocol.
Mhm.
And
I used to
this
get a
is
month.
in the days. This is in the days before the internet, right? So it wasn't like I could hang out on my smartphone or pull out my laptop. You had like TV, but couldn't go outside, couldn't see my friends. She'd take away the
you could watch
Nintendo.
TV when you were grounded? What was that like?
Yeah. I watched a lot of like Divorce Court and People's Court and stuff like that, and What's Happening Now, all the shows that were on like Channel 38 and stuff. Yeah. So let me get into a little bit of the traits. Like I was saying, a couple minutes ago, a lot of what we think that comes to mind for most people, I think that they would associate with being the oldest, middle, or youngest are pretty much what a lot of researchers say. So the firstborns, tend to be the guinea pig, right? That, parents first experience parenting usually. So the rules tend to be a little bit, maybe not stricter, but I think parents tend to be more intentional, maybe even like more attentive to their firstborn. And then as more children are introduced and that level of anxiety about parenting goes down because they've been through it, maybe, I'm not saying this is a case, but it could be a trend of parents kind of not being as anxiously attentive to their kids, becoming a little bit more permissive, things like that. Although sounds like Mom did not get more permissive necessarily with you two than she was with me. But I'm glad we had this conversation because I really thought, you guys probably got it easy with her.
I'm sure there's going to be conversations where like a lot of us are going to be, oh, I'm surprised of this or I'm surprised that, because there was even times. I mean, there was a conversation we had like a year or two, David, where you were surprised about something, and I was like, I can't believe you thought the opposite of what was in reality. So,
so the oldest tend to be, more responsible. There's actually a professor out of the University of Austin. Her name is Sandra Black. She is not a psychologist. She's actually an economist. I came across an article where she claimed that according to research that she was a part of, oldest siblings tend to be more financially successful and more successful with their careers than other siblings in the family. That is not something that I think very many people have latched onto, or I think the jury is still out on that, whether that tends to even be a general trend, much less something that we can say is definitely tends to happen, right? But I can tell you, as the firstborn, definitely feel that pressure to succeed, because one thing that I would hear from Mom all the time was that I had to set a good example for my younger brother and sister. And I had to apply myself. So the middle children, a lot of the research says, and I don't know that this would apply in Dana's case, because the middle children, they tend to be diplomats, is what, tend to be really good at mediating conflict. One way that middle children, it is believed, can get more attention is by being that mediator between siblings who are in conflict with each other. I think there is such an age difference between Shelly and I that was something that Dana never really had to do. One thing I do find, though, Dana has always struck me, you've always struck me as like the most sentimental and the most interested in making connections, like that family connection. I don't know if that's just my perception or if that's something you would agree with, but to me, I would say you are the one that tries to apply the glue the most to get the family together.
I wouldn't argue with that.
Which is similar to, I mean, that is a diplomatic skill, right?
Mhm.
So, and then the youngest sibling tends to be a little bit more carefree. Impulsive is a word that comes up a lot. And generally likes to be the center of attention. I would say definitely for the first 5 or 6 years of Michelle's life where, I was present in the house. And I don't mean this in a bad way, but I'd say she was pretty much the focus of all our attention for the most part.
Definitely,
Her and that monster chair that she had, that was the only thing that
we all fought over that thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mom used to get so mad at us over that.
Yeah.
I loved that blue chair. Oh.
So didn't we.
Yeah. The other thing is, regarding oldest children, there's this idea that oldest siblings, when they get out into the world in the workforce or whatever, that they gravitate towards leadership roles. I am it took me several years before wanting to actually even consider being in something that would be considered a leadership role. Because now I'm a manager, but that I've been a manager for less than a year. I spent most of my life thinking like, I don't want anything to do with leadership or management. And I thought that was true, but now that I'm doing it, there's actually a lot about it that I enjoy. There's a lot about it I don't enjoy, but I do like being in a position where, not that I'm an expert therapist by any means, but I do have, 8-9 years under my belt at this point. So having people that are new graduates that are coming to work for us that will ask me for consultation or running stuff by me, I like having the opportunity to provide that level of guidance to people where I'm not telling them what to do, but I'm just kind of exploring with them and helping them determine what could be a good route you could go, and have some experiences of my own to sort of, draw from. I've been talking a lot.
That's funny.
What do you all think so
Yeah,
far?
that's funny because I feel like Dana, you and I have been in manager roles since we were 18.
Young.
I feel like it's really odd that society thinks that the older one would be, or the firstborn would be that manager seeking that role, and it's completely switched with the three of us. That's very interesting to me.
That's probably more from the environmental aspect of our development, probably, because I think about early on in high school, I was a captain on cross country and track very early. So that trained me how to be a leader, in a kind of different way. So that by the time I got out of high school, I had all these leadership skills I had accrued through being a captain of a team, multiple teams. So I gravitated naturally to management, and leadership came naturally. And you would dance, going to dance, and I'm sure you probably led classes and at camp, helped out with dance camp and stuff like
I
that.
spent a lot of time.
Those are all
dance
things
captain. Yeah.
environmentally where you were not even, without even realizing it, being trained in leadership, which would give you the edge on those management roles. Whereas I don't know if David had that type of stuff when he was growing up.
Well, not when I was growing up, but when I was in the military, obviously, as you rise through the ranks, even as an enlisted person, when I made the rank of staff sergeant, you have to go through airman leadership school. So I was introduced to these topics, and I would have to write performance reports. So I was doing sort of supervisory stuff, but there was always somebody above me that was really calling the shots, and even now in my current position, there is someone above me that is calling the shots, but there's a lot that I have to make a decision on. So it is a new role for me. And I'm just realizing I didn't tell you how I got onto this topic in the first place, because it actually was Michelle's topic last week that got me on it. And that was when I got my copy of Remember the Titans. I was just looking at the back and I saw that it came out in 2000. This is how my mind works. And then I thought, oh, I remember 2000. That's when I came home from Montana before going to England, and Dana had graduated high school. And that made me remember how I felt. I think it was the one time in my life I felt genuinely jealous of one of my siblings, because Dana seemed to have such a radically different and more positive experience with just high school and growing up in general from like what I was seeing than what I myself had. So that got me thinking, like, what were the different things that went into, our experiences, not just as kids, but as adults too, and kind of turned us into the people we are today.
It's an
Yeah,
interesting
I would say,
thought.
Dana, you were a jock, right, in high school? Like, you were popular?
I wasn't a
Or
jock.
maybe not jock, but you were popular?
I was one. I think, and I'm sure any of my friends from high school that watch this. I mean, if I was gonna guess, I think I wasn't like super popular, but I was like just one of those. I got along with everybody. There wasn't anybody I didn't really get along with. So I was just one of those people that you put me in a situation, and it's kind of like what made me good in like management roles. It's what made me good working in restaurants. Any career I've taken, really, I'm an adaptable person. So you put me in an environment, because I worked so hard at it when I was younger. I've always been like an adaptable person, and I can make myself feel comfortable, and I can help make other people feel comfortable in situations. So I was always one of those people in high school that got along with everybody, and that was just sheer like my willingness to be an adaptable person, I think.
The hallmark of the middle sibling.
Well, you were in a lot of clubs too, right? You
Mhm.
you had good grades, so you were in National Honor Society, you ran track, you ran cross country, you were in the band. There were probably a lot of friend groups that you were part of that maybe you wouldn't have been a part of. Like, I
Yep,
don't know if a
fighting
football
fighting
player,
for-
and band person
fighting
are
for-
friends,
fighting for parental approval had the added effect of me acquiring some level of popularity and friendships.
What about you, Shell? What,
My high
like
school
in high school,
life.
were you part of, like, did you play any sports? I know you did dance for most of, your growing up, but
Yeah, no high school sports. I did basketball briefly, like the town league in middle school. And then when high school came, I would have like tried out for basketball or tried out for cheering, but dance was always priority. Same reason why I never did chorus, because chorus concerts were on the night of dance class, and dance was always my number one thing. So, yeah, I mean, in high school, I had my like 4 or 5 friends and that was it. But I am not friends with any of them except for the one that I married.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think my friendships really came from dance. Those, again, like where, who you hang out with when you're younger. But yeah, dance friends were the one. But no, I really didn't like school. I didn't like to learn in that setting. I failed multiple classes. I remember mom telling me that on the day of my graduation, that like I can't believe that we're here. Like, you're actually graduating, because it was such a struggle for me to get like to do any grade, any classroom, any homework. It was awful. I mean, that was usually why I was grounded, was because of grades and progress reports and report cards. And, it was always, she's a nice girl, very, quiet in class, great in class, needs to put more effort in. So it's kind of amazing now where I have, again, I don't know I don't exactly know. I mean, I know a little bit, like mom worked hard, so we watched mom work hard, which probably made us work hard.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's shocking to me that I'm like, if you told someone in high school that like I'm an onboarding manager, they would be like, no, this girl, no, she's not. Like, she just doesn't even know how to study. Now I do. It's just really, yeah. High school was not for me. I never ever want to go back, ever.
So I was the only one that liked school.
yeah, I mean, I can relate to what
I think
Michelle was
so.
saying. And again, just like with Shell, that was a lot of what would get me grounded was poor grades. And in mom's case, she would always be like, well, you're you should be a straight A student. You should be, you need to apply yourself more. And that's what teachers
Yep.
would say, like, oh, he just watches the world go by. He doesn't really apply himself. So I think a lot of people, teachers from back then, if you were to tell them that I now have a master's degree and, a pretty successful career, not like super successful, but I mean, like, I have a career. I don't think that anyone would believe it, so.
I mean, you guys know, like, my whole college, like, the guy at Anita Marie's restaurant, the customer that told me my life would amount to nothing if I didn't go to college. Do you guys know this story?
Sounds familiar.
I don't think I've ever heard it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There was a customer. I had just graduated high school. Wasn't really sure what I was going to do yet. And I had done orientation at a community college. And then, financially some things fell through. So I didn't end up going. And when I was working, they were like, oh, no, you have to go to college. And I was like, well, I have time. I'm 18. They're like, if you don't go, you'll never have a career. You won't matter. Nothing will matter for you. And I was like, oh, so now I'm just going to prove you wrong and I'm never going to go to college and I'm going to get a good job. That's not really what happened, but it did. I don't have a college degree. I have a good job because I work for a company that, prioritizes experience over degree, which is great for me. And I've learned a lot and I've worked hard to get where I am. And I don't know if that would have happened if I just can't. I could never imagine telling someone at 18 your life's not going to matter if you don't go to college.
So our guidance counselor, when I was in 6th grade, because we all met with our guidance counselor, who shall remain nameless. You guys probably know who it is. Actually told me that maybe I should not set my sights on college because, we're a poor family. So it's probably going to be out of reach. Yeah.
Oh my God.
So, I mean, I wasn't thinking like, and this is the truth. I never thought to myself, I'm going to prove everybody wrong, because I would hear similar stuff from my friends growing up, because I'd always say, like, from the time I was 10 years old, I had decided I was leaving Rockland forever. And that was like, I'm dead serious. At 10 years old, I'm like that. I'm leaving this town forever as soon as I can. And I'm never coming back. And I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to be successful at it. I'm going to make a life for myself. But even my friends would be like, well, all these things you talk about wanting to do, you come from a poor family. Like, I hear that still all the time. Like, it's unrealistic. I think that's one of the messages I've always gotten. And it's never been, oh, I'm going to prove everybody wrong. It's that I myself have always believed it's possible. So it's like proving myself right. And here I am,
Yeah.
Not world famous or anything like that. Not rich, but definitely much further along than I think anybody that knew me back in the day would have given me credit for getting to.
Yeah, I think it's the work you put in. Like, yeah, we were poor growing up, but you know what you can do? You can get a job and you can save. I mean, it's not like this is the end all be all. If I wanted to go to college right now, I could. I just choose not to. It's not something I'm prioritizing. Do I know I could go to school now and do well? Yes. 100% I know I would, because I would put the effort in. But back that year in I think we put a lot of pressure on kids to make a decision about what they're going to do at 18 when they're not fully developed. They haven't lived. They don't know what they want to do yet, which is why I'm a big person of like trades, like get into the trades, because you can always fall back on it and then it might guide you into something that you might want to do. But yeah, we just put a lot of pressure on 18-year-olds that I could not handle that pressure, which is why I took the path I did. But that's my 2 cents on that for now.
Yeah, I mean, you don't really know who you are when you're that young. Even as you're finishing high school, you still don't know. I mean, I went to high school, went to college, stopped going to college, went into the workforce, stayed in the workforce, but also went back to college to get my degree. And where I was by the time I got my degree was completely different than where I was when I originally went into college years earlier. Like you have growing to do before you find out and even now it's like, I couldn't tell you what I guess I kind of know what I would really like to do with my life, but back then it was 18 to 25 years old. Like, who knows what you want to do with your life? You learn about yourself as you experience things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like if I were to go to school right now, I would know what I would want to go for. Like I would have a very clear path. It's something that interests me. It has nothing to do with my career I'm in now. And I don't even know if I went to school if I would change careers because I love my job that I have now. I wouldn't want to change it, but I do have other interests that I would like to learn about and have a deeper understanding on. Not necessarily change my career, but yes, like I know what I would go to school for now. And I could not say that at 18.
That's one of the big complaints I have about college is that the first 2 years are a waste of time, because if you're a college bound student, even if you know what you want to do, you know the field you want to get into, you graduate high school, you go into college, the first 2 years are just a repeat of the last 2 years of high school. You don't even get to really study what you're interested in until you've gone through college for 2 years if you're in a 4-year program. So
Yeah.
that's something that I would love to see change. Probably never will because there's too much money involved. But
Well, the other part of that is the colleges would say the kids are leaving high school now not as prepared. So we have to rehash those last 2 years of high school because they're not as prepared to handle the college work.
then how the colleges could get around that? They could actually tighten up their admission standards, because right now, back in the 90s, I think it was George Carlin, or maybe it was early 2000s. He said, pretty soon, all you're going to need to get into college is an F and pencil, right? And that's actually, it's kind of, again, the college is saying, okay, these students aren't prepared, but we're going to take them anyway. Like, they're not prepared to embark on this program of study, but we're going to take them anyway. And we're just going to rehash the last 2 years. I don't know that I agree with that. I think if somebody's not prepared, then maybe they shouldn't get in. I wasn't prepared when I first tried college. I shouldn't have gone in. I was too focused on just getting out of, like, just being away from home. That was where my focus was. Wasn't
I was
until
only accepted to community
30,
college. So that tells you where I was.
I was accepted to like 20 different colleges, and I went to community college. There's nothing wrong with community college at all.
I don't think there's nothing wrong
no,
with
I
community
know.
college at all.
I don't think so either. But I'm saying, to your point, Dave, like, I applied to other schools, and because I did not have the grades, I did not get in. So I do think, well, that was again back in 2006. So, you apply in 2005, 2006. So I don't know if it has changed now, but I definitely was denied schools that I applied to. We're completely off topic, I feel.
I don't think so necessarily.
I think David was kind of hoping we'd go off topic.
It goes back to what I was saying earlier. Like, the position of somebody's birth order among their siblings is just one piece. And this leads into, like, what do each of you think, if you had to say, and granted, knowing that there's a lot of different factors that go into the formation of who we are as people, do you think that there is one maybe overarching factor or one particular piece that's like key to the development of who you are today?
Well, it sounds like, even looking at like Adler's birth order chart, it does sound like some of those characteristics we all fall under in some way, even if it's in a small way. So I wouldn't flat out reject the theory completely, and I would even give credence to some of it. Some of it, I think, really the person's mentality and environment probably play a bigger role than the actual birth order of itself. Because I think I think our environment and our experience definitely shaped each of us differently than our birth order did. But then again, in some ways, your birth order kind of does influence the experience you have as a child. So it's almost like I can't think of the word I'm looking for, but some sort of cycle.
They go hand in hand almost.
Yeah. Not totally equivalent, but kind of, kind
Relative.
of a cycle. Relative.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say environment. That's what I was going to say. That had the biggest impact on me. I think, cycles, you either break them or you don't, as you get older. And that was a big thing for me. I wanted to break cycles. So
Yeah, I think environment is important too, but then you can even break environment down. Like, which one are we talking about? Are we talking about the home environment? Are we talking school environment? How much does somebody's, if they're an adult, does their work environment affect who they are as a person? You know,
All
so
of the,
like
I
even
would say all of the
because
above, honestly. Like,
yeah,
you know, because you think about when you're a child before you go to school, your family's your social life. That's your social environment is your family. You start going to school, you're breaking away from that social environment of your family. You're getting into a social environment of other people. Now that social environment is going to be influencing you in combination with the influence you're getting at home. And it's like, I don't think there's any determination over which one is more influential. I think people take each experience, and that's kind of like what shapes them, is that the melding of those two environments, and then when they get older, their work environment. So, lost my train of thought about what I was going to say on that one.
how much of a role do you think genetics plays in our personality?
I don't really know that I think it counts at all, honestly. I don't know.
I think it does. I think it does.
Really?
Yeah. I think genetics plays a big role in personality, in not just physical characteristics, but some mental characteristics as well. I think.
Well, yeah, obviously physical.
I think that David, I don't know if you want to go into this too, but I think our father had an addictive nature, and I think that I certainly have somewhat of an addictive personality, and I would equate that to genes. I think, yeah, I think our father was kind of reckless in other ways, and I think certainly in my life I've been reckless at times. I don't know, David, how you feel about that, but I know that I've had some reckless behavior like in my life that I would directly hearing stories from mom were just like our father. I think some of mom's genes we all inherited. So yeah, I would say genetics plays a big part of it. Once again, not all of it.
I get
not all, but I
Yeah.
definitely think it does play a big part.
I don't know if that's genetics or if that's just being around. Like, for instance, my dad had a wicked temper. I can get to that level when I get really mad about something, and I work at not getting that. But is that because I saw it happen, or is that like I have a temper, or that I can have a temper? You know what I mean? I don't know if that's
It's
genetic or if that's
Well, that's the
because
age-old
I
nature
had
versus
seen it.
nurture
I would
push-pull.
go back to
Mm.
you'd have to go back to the root of his anger, and I don't think the root of his anger was genetic. I think the root of his anger was trauma. So
That's true.
you know what I mean? So it's not like he's passing on this anger
Yeah.
gene, because that wasn't a
Well-
gene he was born with necessarily. It
Well,
was a learned.
hold on,
Okay.
because
Oh, no.
and I'm not a neuroscience expert, but there is a lot of research that has been done on trauma, and I did go to the trauma conference a couple years ago. There's a big conference they have every year where they publish these neuroimaging studies and talk about some of the work they're doing on the effect trauma has on our development. It does actually cause physical structure changes in the brain. It does affect the formation of our neurons. So one thing that I remember that came out, they had done this group of researchers had done a study recently, and they found kids who had been exposed to verbal arguing, like not necessarily physical domestic violence, but verbal arguing, younger kids, their anterior cingulate cortex, which is a part of the brain I'm not going to get into, it's part of our frontal cortex. It helps us, anticipate the future or use foresight, right? Obviously something that takes a while to develop and grow. But they did neuroimaging studies on people who had been exposed to that as children. And they found that kids that had been regularly exposed to that, they could not, like when it came to instant gratification, that area of their brain would light up right away. But when it came to like holding on to that impulse and, envisioning in the future, like if I'm good now, I'll get rewarded, like, sometime in the future, that part of their brain would not light up. And I don't know the exact specifics of the study, but they linked it to this idea of seeing and being exposed to frequent screaming matches.
Wouldn't that be environmental? An environmental influence, though?
An environmental influence, but it also changes the structure of the brain.
I wouldn't argue that. It's not going to change your genes. That's what I'm saying. That's my argument. It's not going to change your genes necessarily. It would have to be repeated generation after generation after generation for it to actually have an evolution in your genes to change the genes.
But think about it, though. That's the thing about trauma, especially when we're talking about the family trauma that we're kind of, talking around. That kind of thing does happen generation after generation after generation.
Until someone stops it.
Like we're talking about, Michelle's dad and his trauma when he was a kid. Well, what would we find if we knew about his parents? And then what would we find if we knew about their parents, right?
So
like we would just be going further down the rabbit hole. So to answer your question, Dana, like, yeah, it does happen generation after generation after generation. And I agree with you both. I don't think it's all genetic or all environmental. I think pretty much most people accept it's a combination. I think the jury's out on what is responsible for what.
When I think of I always joke that oh, I have to pee again, like I got mom's bladder. I think that stuff is like genetic and it makes me laugh and stuff. And then I think oh, like we just ate dinner, gotta have dessert, gotta have that sweet tooth. Like I think sweet tooth runs in the family. So I think that must be some sort of genetic because all of our aunts are led to we like the Italian desserts and stuff. So I guess you're right, Dana. I guess there are some things that are genetic that maybe don't they don't make us who they are, but they're part of who we are. I guess does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah.
It's almost like it's what came first, chicken or the egg argument, if you think about it in some ways. When you're talking about which one, environment, nature versus nurture, environment versus genetics, which one has more of an influence. And now we're adding this new birth order, argument about how much does the birth order play a factor. Although you could put birth order in with environment, I think they're both very closely related. So
yeah, I would. Yeah. I would say the birth order is one feature of the environment that we grow up in. Yeah.
Yeah, because we are oldest, middle, youngest, but there are other families that have 5, 6, 7 kids. So there's multiple middle children. I don't know how do they, is it second born? How do they determine who's the middle child of siblings of 6?
Well, should we refer to the Adler chart?
So I can tell you a little bit more about Maury Bowen and what he didn't just look at birth order. He actually looked at, what are the characteristics of an older brother of brothers or an older brother of sisters or right. So and again, he had
gender played a role too.
So I'll read a little bit. So an oldest brother of brothers, right? And I'm also an oldest brother of a sister. So oldest brother of brothers, responsible, tends to be loyal and shy around women. But the oldest brother of sisters generally tends to not tend towards sexism and to work well with women is what Bowen came up with. Right.
I feel like that makes sense. You're exposed to a lot of women.
His characterization of a youngest sister who has older brothers it would be someone who is more motivated by her relationships than her work and tends to have an attractive personality to men. Let's see. The younger brother of brothers, living in the moment, yielding with women. Those are Maury Bowen's words, not mine. So, but he had his theory has 11 different positions of, that he describes based on that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
The one thing I do remember reading
of dynamics, right?
And I don't know if this is true or not, although my wife really liked it, was that the oldest sibling in one family who marries the youngest sibling of another tend to have the most harmonious marriages, according to this theory. The idea being the oldest
Really?
sibling is used to being in a position of leadership and kind of directing things, and the youngest sibling in a family is used to kind of going with the flow and allowing someone else to take the reins. So the idea is that there's no power struggle happening in such a marriage.
What about two youngest? Like Mike and I are the youngest of both of our sibling sets. What is that? Do you know anything about that?
Um, no, I didn't actually look that. I wonder, it was interesting when I was kind of doing my research for this episode. I was thinking about that, but I never got around to actually checking it out.
Oh, I'll have
My
to look it up.
thought
That's-
is,
I'm curious.
my thought, if I was to take a stab at it, of what the theory might be, is that, according to this idea laid down, that the youngest in a family is sort of not wanting to take the lead and wanting somebody else to kind of direct things, is that in a marriage like that, there would be no clear leader, which could be a positive, but maybe also at times not a positive, because there could be a indecisiveness about big decisions.
I mean, Mike and I are indecisive, but not about big decisions. But that is so funny because no, you know what? It's I would rename it as compromise. I think we unless there's something we feel really strongly about, we'll say it. But yeah, people always joke that we're indecisive. Like, what do you want to eat? I don't know. What do you want? Whatever.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
So that was, I just thought it would be an interesting topic to delve into just a little bit, just scratch the surface. It's not meant to be comprehensive by any means. What I presented to you both today is not meant to be the be all end all by any means, because there's a lot that goes into it, more than what we talked about. But those are sort of the high points. I didn't want you or anybody listening to feel like they were sitting in a college lecture. So
I loved it. I learned a lot. This is fun.
Yeah. It was a good conversation starter.
Yeah.
what's our conversation starter for next week, Dana?
Next week is going to be kind of related to what we talked about this week. Next week, we're going to be talking about memories. I'm very curious about, we'll talk about how different people can experience the same thing, but have altering or differing memories of what happened. We'll talk about false memories. We'll talk about memories that we each have, good memories, bad memories, our favorite memories, maybe our least favorite memories. I'm also curious what each of your very first memory that you can think of in your life. Because I have one.
Right now.
I have one that I always think. I have one that I always think of, and I don't even know if it's really my first memory. It's just what I've always remembered as my first memory, probably since I was like 5 years old. And it's from before I was 5, but I've always, since I was 5, it's been my first memory. This is my first memory.
I have my first memory, and I actually got confirmation from Mom that it is accurate.
Interesting.
And it was from when I was like, I think she said I was like 2.5.
See, and I was probably 2.5 or 3. And David, when I give my first memory, you would be the only one left alive that could confirm it for me if it is indeed inaccurate. I mean, it could be an accurate thing.
Okay.
So I guess in that case, it would be my very first memory because.
Well, let's hope nothing happens to me between this week and next. Otherwise, it will forever remain unresolved.
Oh my God. Way to go dark.
It's interesting because my first memory, talking about trauma, my first memory is both traumatic but also kind of endearing.
Oh.
Give you a little. That's what we call in the business a. I don't know. A preview.
Teaser. All right. Well, I'll start thinking about memories. And you know what, Dana? I can send some
a tease.
pictures.
It's a tease for next week. I don't know why that word escaped my big market tease. The term escaped my brain for a second. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Charlie. What were you going to say?
I have a bunch of pictures. I just got from mom and Steven's place. So I have the box of pictures.
Oh, you do?
So maybe actually during Christmas we can go through them again. But I can take some stuff out and we can have some pictures up there from our younger days.
Cool. Sounds good to me.
Cool.
Alrighty.
Well, it was amazing to spend time with you both again. I can't even believe it's already been an hour. It doesn't feel like
I
it was that.
know.
Time flies when I'm
Crazy.
hanging out with my brother and sister. I love them so much.
I know. I look forward to it every week.
I do too.
I'm actually every week now. I'm just anxious for Sunday to get here so I can talk to you guys. So that's not even. I mean, that's just.
Oh.
So I'm
love
already anxious
it.
for next week.
I know.
So until then, everybody,
Yay.
we'll see you next week. I hope everyone has a wonderful week and ponders some of the things we learned from David's presentation today. And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. SibRiv is produced by DS Entertainment Network and Dana Scott. Your hosts are David Scott, Dana Scott, and Michelle Zaborski. Our theme song is Alone Tonight by Ocean Drive, which can be found on creatormix.com. Be sure to check the description below for links to our social media, YouTube, and Spotify pages. The Sibling Rivalry Podcast uploads a new episode every Monday. Be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell so that you can be made aware every time a new episode drops.
That was so fun. That was a good one.
Yeah. It felt like as we were talking, it was going by really quickly. Like
Yeah.
when you started wrapping up, I was like, we're really wrapping up already? Like, it didn't feel like it was that long.
I was like, I love when we just talk about stuff. Like, I love where it's like we start at this point and we end up on like 18 different
Yeah.
topics, but
That's how we work best. I think we work best with taking something that can be a springboard and just seeing where it takes us and following that to wherever.
I'm very cognizant of the fact that people that don't know me and haven't talked to me on a regular basis, if I'm talking too fast, my tone jumbles my words and people wouldn't be able to understand what I'm saying.